What are the 5 biggest mistakes homeowners make in the New York area? In this video, Damaris and I break it all down for you. You definitely want to watch it until the very end because the last mistake could cost you thousands and thousands of dollars.
My name is Damaris and this is my brother Walter, and we're local real estate agents here in Bronx and Westchester County. And we've been doing this for way too long, and we talk to thousands of homeowners every year. So we have a really good idea of mistakes that people make when they own a home.
You said that like it's a bad thing.
What's a bad thing?
We've been doing this for way too long.
We've been doing this for way too long.
I disagree. I've been doing this for 17 years, and I love my job. So
I love my job too. No, I really appreciate and enjoy being a real estate agent.
Okay.
I wouldn't do anything else.
Me neither. Okay.
But we've been doing this for a long time.
We've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
So we know a little thing or two.
Yeah, we know. We learned a couple of things along the way. So the biggest mistakes homeowners make. I would say the biggest mistake people make is not screening tenants. And that comes from just a lack of understanding that things could go wrong. Like they buy a house, they get a tenant, and because they don't screen them properly, they kind of just look at them and kind of decide, okay, I think this person is going to be a good tenant. Don't check any paperwork, and just put them in there. And now the problem is becoming bigger and bigger because over the past decade or so, home values have really appreciated. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. When I started selling real estate, the average 2-bedroom in the Bronx was $1,200 a month for rent, for a 2-bedroom. So if your tenant wasn't paying their rent, you would have to make up the difference of $1,200, which is a lot of money. But Damaris, what does a 2-bedroom in the Bronx right now rent for?
25.
Right, so it's
minimum.
double. Mm-hmm. So now that gap that you have to make up just doubled.
So in New York City, it takes on average anywhere between I would say 9 and 12 months to evict somebody. It's about a $5,000 fee for attorney fees. So if you start stacking those numbers up, $5,000 attorney fees, an average of $2,500 a month for 9 months. How much money is that? Like
about $23,000.
$23,000 that could potentially be a loss.
When you're evicting someone, you're not collecting any rent from that time.
You could always sue somebody for the money that's owed to you, but if they haven't been paying, what are the chances of?
Have you seen many landlords become successful in winning those lawsuits? Because I haven't. I've never
come across anybody.
I've come across people that try to sue to get the rent money back, and they never do. They just it gets stuck in the court.
Sure.
Even if you win your lawsuit, how are you going to then collect? Then you got to go to a collection agency, and so it just becomes a mess.
Walter, you talk to mostly sellers. How often do you come across somebody that has a problem tenant?
I probably come across at least once a week on average of the homeowner telling me, revealing everything to me about how their tenant hasn't paid them in 3 months or 6 months, or how they've been in court since last summer. Right now, I have one guy that started the eviction over the summer. They got the approval, I think, in February, and now we're going into May, and he's on the waiting list for the marshal. So he already won the eviction. The eviction started a year ago, and now he's still waiting for the marshal to kick his tenant out.
It's so stressful.
Yeah.
Just thinking about it, I'm like...
Yeah. So for me, this is a very common conversation that I have probably at least maybe once or twice a week.
So there's no guarantee that your tenant is not going to be a problem. But typically, through the screening process, you can kind of weed out problematic people and not rent to them.
So Damaris, you've had to deal with a problem tenant in the past. How was that experience for you?
Horrid.
Okay.
In retrospect, it wasn't terrible, but in that moment, it was high levels of stress. Because we went about a year and a half of not collecting rents consistently and having to come up with to pay for the mortgage.
So right now I have one client that he met their tenant in church. And he just assumed because I go to church and this person goes to the same church as I'm going, that they just gave him the apartment and didn't check any documentation, no paperwork, anything. And now they're dealing with a situation where it's starting to become a problem.
Yeah, so those are the errors you don't want to commit.
Right.
That feeling that, I know this person, or this person knows that other person and they're good people. At the end of the day, it's a business relationship.
I wanted to ask you about that because it's a business relationship, But sometimes when you rent to relatives or friends or people that know other people that like referrals, now there's a mixture of I like this person.
Don't do it.
So
don't do it.
You wouldn't rent to a relative.
I probably would not.
That's fascinating.
I probably would not because guys, let's get serious. Like, my mortgage needs to get paid. And if my tenants are not paying their part, I'm paying the mortgage from my pocket, which means something is falling short, right? Whether it's a vacation or whether it's food on the table, but something is falling short. And that's the reality. So let's avoid that.
So your way of dealing with this is just avoidance of like, just let me not even put myself in that situation.
No.
Where now I have to have that very uncomfortable conversation with somebody that I care about.
Right. There's enough people that need to rent, that make the money.
Right.
That have the credit history.
There's good tenants out there.
There are enough good tenants out there where you don't have to put yourself in that situation. Yeah. And I'll be honest, every time I hear a sob story, it usually is a family member or someone you know.
Yeah.
Or you're collecting $300 in rent, right? Versus $1,500 in rent because they've been there so long and you've created that emotional relationship with
that
the
connection,
person, that connection with the person. So let's avoid that. Another homeowner mistake we have seen. I see this one a lot because I'm constantly showing houses, but it's putting off repairs.
Okay.
Right. So I own a 2-family home. I have tenants. I'll tell you what, you cannot put off repairs. Like happy tenants is a happy life. Happy wife, happy life. No, happy tenants, happy life.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Very, very true.
Okay.
You can't put off repairs when you have tenants. There's some things you can put off.
Okay.
I would say.
Cosmetic stuff?
Yes.
But functioning stuff like pipes, electricity.
None of that stuff you can put off. Even if you don't have tenants, even if you're a homeowner, you just don't want to put that stuff. What tends to happen is if you don't fix a leaky ceiling, it gets worse.
Yeah, it's not, the ceiling is not going to fix itself. Like.
No, I've been there.
We're like, oh, let's just ignore it.
Yeah, I've ignored those issues and it never turns out well.
Okay.
Because it just costs twice as much.
But cosmetic stuff, like I had mold on my ceiling in the bathroom and I saw the mold and I was like, oh, let me ignore it. And then 6 months later, oh, the mold is there, now it's growing. So then we're like, fine, forget it, let's get a contractor in here. We paid him $1,000 to replaster the whole ceiling and get everything done. But that's me living in the apartment. I think if it was a tenant's apartment,
right,
and they were complaining about stuff, then their complaints just probably grow on top of each other. Like,
I'll tell you guys a bad story.
Okay.
So my top floor tenant called me one day and was like, "Hey, there's a small leak coming from like the corner of the back bedroom." And I was like, "Okay, that's weird, but we'll get it checked." And I sent Jeff up to the roof. And it was a sunny day. He was like, "Babe, there's nothing there." He was like, "It's like a little puddle, but it's no big deal." And a couple months later, they sent me a video of water.
Oh no!
Falling through the ceiling, like coming down,
oh,
like
my God.
heavy rain coming down their wall.
Inside,
like they woke up to
God.
like, don't do this. They woke up to like a puddle of water.
In the bedroom?
Yeah.
Oh no.
And so I called my contractor the same day. He shows up like a few hours later and he explains to me what happened and it was a gutter issue.
Oh.
And so we had to install a new gutter to stop that from happening, have their wall fixed. I mean, this is not Jeff's fault, but if he would have known what he was doing, he would have went and looked at the gutter and said, "Hey babe, we have a gutter issue." And we would have had it fixed before the wall came down.
Wow.
And then not have to fix the wall, if that makes sense.
Okay, so the expense went up.
Yeah.
Do you have like go-to contractors now? Do you have a checklist of all the stuff, or like are you still looking for referrals and for people to help you on certain things?
No, we have a couple of people that we kind of go to, that have done good work and they're trustworthy more than anything. Not the cheapest, but they're trustworthy, and we know that when we call them, the job is going to get done.
Okay. Well, on a tangent, I remember when my mom bought the house in Brooklyn, her first property, we had a leak behind the wall. And we didn't know anybody. Like, my mom's first time owning a house. So we went to the Yellow Pages, and we called a plumber. And the plumber was like, the leak is behind this wall. And he was like, okay.
I don't remember this. This
was like 1997, 1998. And so the plumber was like, I need to fix it. And we're like, okay, fix it. He took a sledgehammer and started breaking the wall.
I mean, that's really...
to get to the pipe. And we were just like in shock because we didn't know that that's what he was going to do. And then he gave us a bill for like $150. But now we had a whole hole.
A whole hole in the...
We had a big hole like in the wall of the kitchen, and we didn't know any better. So I guess over time, as a homeowner, you do get to know which repair people are better than others.
Yes, absolutely.
And you need to keep that information on handy with you, because repair work can come up at any moment in time.
Mm-hmm. What I have learned over the years is if you see a problem, address it immediately.
Don't let it sit there.
Do not let it sit there.
The mold on the ceiling is not going to heal itself and not going to just go away. It's just not.
It's just going to get worse.
Okay, another big mistake that we see homeowners make, and this pertains a lot to the Bronx, but I do see it all over, is building illegal structures. So in New York City, actually, this is the law for everywhere. Everything that's built should have what's called a certificate of occupancy. However, having said that, there are a lot of loopholes around that law. You're going to say something, or? What's so funny?
Nothing. I mean, here's what I think. I'll be very honest. And I think it's because I'm a Bronx homeowner.
Okay.
If you put it up, make sure you can bring it down.
That's your rule?
That's the rule of thumb.
Right, because that's one way of going around the illegal structure problem. If you put it up and you don't tell anyone or you don't say anything, those are the homeowners that get into the most amount of trouble. Mm-hmm. But like taking it down, I think that's one of the loopholes that I would say. Another big loophole is that the C of O law in the Bronx passed in 1938, which means that anything built before 1938, and a lot of the houses in our area are older than 1938, right? They're built
free for all.
Right. Anything built before 1938, there's technically does not require a C of O, and the buildings department in the Bronx does not keep good records. So it's always interesting to me when somebody from another state comes to New York and they go, "Oh, how many bedrooms is it legally?" And my response to them is that we don't keep those records. There's no bedroom or bathroom count on any of the C of Os. So
not in the Bronx.
And certain parts of Westchester either. Like Yonkers, there's no bedroom bathroom count on most C of Os. Maybe the new ones, yes, but on the old ones, no. Mount Vernon keeps really bad records as well. So if there's no record of what it is legally, then technically, like Damaris said, not that anything goes, but there's a lot more leniency. Now, getting things legalized is a double-edged sword, because dealing with the Bronx Building Department
not necessary.
is problematic. I'll give you an example. I had a house that I sold in the South Bronx that the homeowner put up solar panels. So he hired a solar panel company to put up the solar panels. They were supposed to open the permit, install the panels, close the permit out. He sold the house in December, and there was still an open permit. So the solar panel company did not close out the permit. He sold the house. He put $10,000 in escrow.
Oh, he never saw that again.
Well, this happened in December, and I've been emailing the solar panel company because the solar panel company told him everything is done. We're good. On the title report, open permit shows up.
Yeah.
They've been going back and forth with an architect and the buildings department. They had the property inspected in March. Guess what happened this week? They failed the inspection. So the open permit is still open. The architect needs to go back to the property. So I kind of understand why a lot of homeowners just bypass the buildings department and don't get involved, because the paperwork there is ridiculous and it takes months. We're talking about months and months and months to close out an open permit.
I mean, that happened when Mom bought the house too in the Bronx. He had converted the 2-car garage into like a full-blown apartment, and the buildings department came in, fined him. I think he had like a $15,000 fine or something like that to pay, and then he had to revert it back to its original condition.
Put it back to a garage.
Right? And Mom didn't close on the property until it was back to a 2-car garage, and everything else was
normal,
as it should on the C of O.
So a lot of times, and with the Bronx, there's so many properties that the buildings department doesn't really have time to go in and inspect and look at every single property and get full detailed description of everything. That's very different in Westchester. In Westchester, there are cities, towns, and villages, and each area has its own buildings department and its own rules and regulations. So and inspectors that come out and look.
Yeah.
So
it's just much more tight knit.
Yeah, and there's less properties. So in a village may only have like 350 houses, and therefore the buildings department keeps detailed records on all 350 properties. Mm-hmm. So it's much harder to get away with things. So I think that's also something that homeowners need to understand is where they're at and what the rules are or how things are done for their specific area.
So I had a client once, right?
Okay.
She had a home in Throgs Neck, and she built out a deck, right out of
legally or illegally?
Illegally.
Okay.
She built a deck out illegally.
Big surprise.
Yeah. So we went in there, we gave her the value of the property, we put it on the market, we knew it was an illegal deck, and she had to agree to bring down the deck in order to sell the home. It's just something that if you're gonna put these structures up, that should be legalized, just know that there might come a time that you have to bring them down, especially if you want to sell the home.
Yeah, all these issues come up when it's time to sell the property. And that's a very valid solution, is to say, okay, we're just gonna take everything down and put it back. I see the homeowners that get into the most trouble is the ones that kind of just put their head in the sand and just ignore the whole thing. Not speaking up is probably the worst thing you could do.
Agreed.
As long as you know that the structure is not supposed to be there, we can work around solutions to kind of help you get to the finish line of selling the property.
Another big mistake we see is when someone overpays for their home. And so we see this a lot when someone is trying to sell their property, but that property hasn't had enough time to appreciate in value since they bought it.
So right now I'm currently working with a client, and they bought their house, I think 2022. So 3 years ago, the house that they bought was listed for $800,000 and they bought it for $920,000. So they paid $120,000 above the asking price. 3 years later, it's time to sell, it's time to relocate. So when I sat down with them and we looked at the information, I said, hey, when you guys bought this house, it feels like you overpaid for it. And their response was like, I know, there was a lot of competition. There were 6 offers on this house, and we felt we had to get it, so we ended up paying a lot of money.
That was the market back in 2022.
Yeah.
You know, any house I did sell back then, and I was a little on hiatus with Aria, but the conversation had to be had where it's like, hey, guys, we're bidding 60, 70, 80,000 over asking. What's the plan with this house? Are we going to be selling in 5 years? Or is the plan to be here for 15, 20 years? Because the reality is in 5 years, the appreciation wasn't going to be there. So my advice is don't do it. If you know the plan, granted things happen, things change, life circumstances, things like that. But if you have a plan, don't do it. Don't overpay.
It's easier to say it than to actually do it, because when you are in that situation and you really, really want to buy a house, and that's just where the market is, but you also have to understand the consequences of your action.
Yeah.
If you are going to overpay for a house, you want to make sure that you're there long enough that it doesn't matter. If you're going to be there for 2-3 years and then you're going to sell it, then there's a risk that you're going to lose some money. The next big mistake that we see a lot of homeowners make is charging tenants lower rents. Now, this problem could be either a couple of $100s a month, or it can range for thousands and thousands of dollars that they're losing every month. And what I see this problem becoming bigger and bigger the longer you own a property. Because if you bought a house back in 1995 and you've had the same tenants there for years, chances are that you did not increase the rents along with the market value.
Guilty.
So,
As charged.
so when you bought your house, what were the rents like on a 3-bedroom?
2,100 was like top.
Okay. And so as the rents went up and the tenants stayed there, did you increase the rents over time, or you kind of just let it sit?
No,
Why not?
because we didn't necessarily need the money. To
Okay.
be honest, yeah, that was really they're great tenants. They're still there. We absolutely love them, but we never really needed the money. Like the mortgage was paying.
God,
itself.
oh, you weren't thinking ahead, like.
No, we were not thinking. Big mistake. Big mistake. Because now that we don't necessarily need the money, but the money is going to facilitate what we have coming up, it's harder now to increase the rent.
As a homeowner, you definitely want to keep up with the fair market rents for many, many reasons. And there's always a risk of losing the tenant when you say, hey, I'm going to increase your rent to $2,500 or $2,700. You always feel that there's a risk that they'll get up and leave. But you can't operate out of fear, because now you're taking $2,100 for an apartment that's really worth $2,500, and that's a $400 problem. Eventually, when the rents go up to $3,000 or $3,500, now it's a $1,500 a month
Very
problem.
much so.
So you kind of just like, before you speak to them, you have to decide like, okay, if they don't want the apartment anymore, it's okay, disconnect, we're gonna go get new tenants.
Yeah, we are actually increasing rents now. And that's exactly what I had to do. And that's exactly the conversation Jeff and I had. We said, okay, we're going to ask for this much. And if they're okay with it, great. And if they're not, we have to be okay with asking them to leave.
Yeah, disconnect from the outcome. It also depends on what you're focusing on. If you're focusing on your relationship with your tenant and how good they've been and how they've always paid the rent on time, then it's much harder to increase the rent compared to just focusing on and saying, look, if they're not willing to pay this price, there's plenty of people out there. But that's another huge mistake, and I see it happen with homeowners all the time, especially with homeowners that are renting to relatives. I see people charge like $700 a month for a 1-bedroom, which is, you can't even get a room for $700 now.
You know, that's the problem when the time comes that they need to sell.
Oh, that's another mistake, because now the person that's used to paying $700 a month for a 1-bedroom, now they're going out there in the fair market and they're seeing minimum 1-bedrooms are like $1,700, $1,800, and they're like, we can't find a place to rent.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's exactly it. So save yourself the headache. Thanks guys for watching. If you like this video and want to see more stuff like this, make sure you hit subscribe.
Bye.